Gentlelady, 30 seconds.
I thank the distinguished. The Congressional Black Caucus budget is compassionate. Why? Because we provide resources for housing. We provide resources for transportation. We don't leave any firefighter or law enforcement officer behind, and we ensure homeland security. But we are the compassionate budget. We are the American dream. We ensure that children, who are our precious resources, have the ability to get complete children's health insurance. I ask my colleagues to support a budget that ensures compassion and the American dream and believes in eliminating the deficit. I yield back.
Woman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Michigan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd now like to yield 2 minutes to our first Vice Chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, the gentlewoman from Oakland, California, Congresswoman Lee.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. First, let me thank our Chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus for her tremendous leadership on this issue and so many other issues. And I want to salute you, Congresswoman Kilpatrick and Congressman Bobby Scott, for your hard work, your diligent work, and putting forth a budget that we can all be proud of. And also, I want to thank our staffs for their dedication and their expertise in putting this together. A budget is a roadmap that identifies and invests in the critical priorities of a nation. And I'm pleased to say that this budget does exactly that. For example, this budget takes the very important step, and this is important, to address the waste, fraud, and abuse at the Department of Defense by urging the implementation of GAO's recommendations to the Department of Defense. By incorporating just a fraction of GAO's suggestions, DOD, for example, has saved over $52 billion over the last few years. Imagine how much more could be saved by fully implementing these recommendations, which are included in the Congressional Black Caucus's budget. While addressing critical reforms at the Defense Department, this will go a long way also in shoring up our national security. I'm pleased to say that this budget shows an understanding that really the Republicans have never shown during their years in power, namely that domestic security is national security. This budget invests in our communities. It invests in our health care. It invests in our future. It helps to lift the 37 million people living in poverty into a standard of living which each and every American deserves, living in the wealthiest and most powerful country in the world. It puts $1.5 billion into Hope 6, into public housing and homeless assistance programs. It allocates another $1.5 billion to the community development block grants and brownfields redevelopment. These are all critical plus-ups that strengthen and add value to our communities and provide that national security and economic security of our people. This budget is balanced. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This budget also adds over $1.3 billion to the Ryan White CARE Act and the Minority AIDS Initiative, and $10 billion into children's health to ensure that no child is without health care in this country. This chairman takes a good budget, our Democratic budget, and makes it simply much better. This budget is balanced, it's fair, it truly is a moral document, what budgets should be. So, Madam Chair and Mr. Scott, I want to thank you for giving our country really a moral document. Thank you very much.
Gentleman kneels back. Gentlewoman from Michigan.
May I inquire on the time, please?
6 3/4 minutes.
And the other side?
5 1/2.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to yield myself 2 minutes, Madam Speaker.
Without objection.
This bill does not raise taxes. This bill does rescind the permanent tax cut for the 1% of the wealthiest Americans and then reinvest that money into American families. This bill balanced the budget. We reduced the deficit that the other party got us in over the last decade, the highest budget deficit in the history of our country. This budget takes care of our troops, protects Americans. This bill is fiscally responsible. We make sure in our budget that we invest in health care for all the children of America. We also take care of those seniors who find themselves in need of adequate health care. Yes, and we fund and make sure Medicare, the health insurance for 44 million seniors, and Medicaid Programs for low-income and disabled Americans are taken care of. Have we spent too much? No, we haven't. Is the budget in balance? Yes, it is. We want to make sure in our Congressional Black Caucus budget that we are leaders. We come here as 43 members of Congress, representing 26 states and 40 million Americans. 10 of our members have districts who are not majority African Americans. We represent Asian Americans, Latino Americans, European Americans, Indian Americans. We are the conscience of the Congress. We bring to you a budget we believe is balanced, it's the best budget, and we ask for your support. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves the balance of her time. Gentleman from Wisconsin.
Madam Chair, I reserve the right to close, and I think that they still have more speakers, so I'll just reserve my time.
Gentleman continues to reserve his time. The gentlewoman from Michigan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to reserve at this time the balance of our time to the chairperson of the Congressional Black Caucus budget, gentleman who has worked tirelessly with our staff, with the members, is a member of the House Budget Committee, knows the need of our country. I reserve and give the balance of our time. Gentleman from Virginia, Congressman Bobby Scott.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for the balance of the time.
Let's see, how much time do I have?
5 1/4 minutes.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, we need to review again where we are because we've heard lectures about fiscal responsibility, and this chart shows where we are in fiscal responsibility way down in the ditch. In fact, when in 2001, we were on a trajectory to pay off the entire national debt by 2013. The gentleman from Wisconsin had a chart that showed that by 2040 we'd almost have enough money to pay interest on the national debt and a little bit of Social Security, and that was it. Well, the main change in that was interest on the national debt. There would be zero interest on the national debt if we hadn't gotten into this mess. In fact, at this point, the gentleman talked about, entitlement reform. For those that aren't aware what entitlement reform means, that means cutting Social Security. Well, in 2001, we had a 10-year surplus of $5.5 trillion. We needed $4 trillion at that point to make sure that we had enough money to pay Social Security for the next 75 years without cutting benefits. So we had entitlement reform covered. The gentleman mentioned jobs that have been created. Remind him, worst job performance since Herbert Hoover. The gentleman mentioned economic development. Worst Dow performance in a quarter of a century. The gentleman mentioned all these revenues we've gotten. Worst revenue performance in the history of record keeping back to 1934. We repeal some of the policies that got us in the mess to begin with. This is one of the tax cuts that got us in the problem, and you can see who gets the benefits. But not only do we eliminate some of the tax cuts that put us in the mess, we're fiscally responsible. We use that to improve the deficit. Our deficit has improved over the Democratic budget $100 billion, over the President's budgets $300 billion. And finally, we save so much that we save interest on the national debt, $14 billion in the last year of the budget. And we're able to fund children's health care, enough money in our budget to fund health care for all children in America, enough in our budget to fund $158 billion more on education than the President's budget. $158 billion. If you have a city, 300,000, $158 billion is enough for $158 million In addition,